this one is a topic that's been in the back of my mind to talk about for some time, but I need to be perfectly honest with you and say I didn't know too much about the topic, so I'm glad that I know a little bit more today, and that is the protocols with people moving things in and out of Ireland, and particularly to Northern Ireland. And when people talk about this sea border, what do they actually mean? I have had lots of discussion with people from Northern Ireland who this is a really big issue for them, and I must admit I've never fully understood it. So what happened this morning was I was on Twitter and I came across a tweet by Jim Allister, who is a TUV MP, and funnily enough, I was actually in his office when I was in Ballymena a couple of weeks ago, although it was unfortunate that Jim nor any of his colleagues were there, bar the receptionist, who was very pleasant. And I left my number in case any of them could have a chance to speak to me. But I was actually heading back to the airport before I realised that the office had phoned me while I was recording an interview out there, and they were happy for me to go and interview them, but it couldn't happen as I was already journeying home. So anyway, I saw Jim put out this tweet today, which was a short video that I'm about to share with you, and he explained what the problem is and why it's actually a threat, and a bigger threat to the union than I actually considered. And now I fully understand why so many of my friends and folk that I know over Northern Ireland are so concerned by the protocols that are in place for any goods going in and out of Northern Ireland. So I'll let Jim explain to you in this speech that he gave. This isn't his whole speech. I've taken it down a wee bit because there's a lot of stuff he was talking about, not about this topic. He was actually a guest speaker at the Boyne Celebrations in Glasgow. So he'd spoke about that for a wee bit at the start and the end of his speech. So I'll share his speech with you just now, then I'll give you my feedback to it once it's complete.
In the very institutions and in the very statutes which established it. In your case, in Scotland, it was the Act of Union of 1707. In my case, coming from Northern Ireland, it was the Acts of Union of 1800. But remember this, both of them have the same principles and indeed the same articles. Article 3 of the Act of Union of 1707, likewise that of 1800, established the political union by establishing a single parliament for this nation. And Article 6 of both Acts of Union established the economic union on the principle that there should at all times be free and unfettered trade between all parts of this kingdom. And of course, sadly, it is that which has been trashed by the iniquitous protocol that followed Brexit. Let's understand what that did to this United Kingdom. Because whereas in England, Scotland and Wales, you got Brexit, we in Northern Ireland did not. We were left behind in the EU's single market. We were left behind under their customs union. And what does that mean? Well, that means this, that being in the EU's customs union signifies that Northern Ireland, alas, is treated in law as part of EU territory, and that Great Britain, the very territory where I stand today, is treated as foreign territory when it comes to the transport of goods from one part of this kingdom to the other. That is the central iniquity of the protocol or the Windsor Framework, that part of this United Kingdom still continues to be regarded as foreign EU territory, and that the rest of it is regarded as a foreign country to Northern Ireland. And that is a shameful thing that no unionist could ever come to terms with, and that no unionist should be implementing in any shape or form.
Go ahead, Shelby boy.
And I say to you today, ladies and gentlemen, Northern Ireland needs your help, because day by day the noose of the EU is tightening around our economy. And it's done in this fashion because we were left in their customs code, because we were left in their single market. We are now governed in 300 areas of law, by laws we don't make, by laws we can't change, by laws made in a foreign parliament in Brussels and Strasbourg. And here's the point. Those 300 areas of law are exactly the same laws that govern the Republic of Ireland, because of course they are still in the EU. And that is how the design of the protocol is to build an all-Ireland economically. You put the two parts of Ireland under the same economic laws as is reflected in those 300 areas of law. You build this stepping stone into an all-Ireland. And that is the menacing threat of the protocol. And that is why it is my mission in Parliament to make sure that this government, this perfidious government, is never allowed to forget the betrayal that took place of my part of the United Kingdom when we were surrendered to EU control.
Go ahead, Joe.
And I say to those of you in Scotland, in Wales, in England, just as Northern Ireland stood with you in our combined collective hour of need during the last World War, provided the ports, provided the barracks for the American troops, did so much that even Churchill had to recognise the singular importance of what Northern Ireland did in that great war. So, the people of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, I say to you, if we are one in this United Kingdom, then never forget what has to be undone. And what has to be undone is the iniquitous betrayal of my part of the United Kingdom, whereby we are left in the EU, in those territories, and under the same laws as the Irish Republic. That is wholly incompatible with our position as being within this United Kingdom. And that is why my life is dedicated to trying to do all I can to reverse that iniquitous situation. And all support and all encouragement that we can get from the rest of the United Kingdom is most important. And you all have members of Parliament. Write to them, educate them, tell them the story that we cannot live in a situation where part of our kingdom is under foreign rule, and it must be recovered from this situation. And of course, in this country, in Scotland, you know something of what it is like to be governed by those who want to break up this United Kingdom. Because of course, you too have a separatist First Minister. Well, you have for now, at least. And I want to say this to you. We in Northern Ireland, sadly, tragically, have also a separatist First Minister. At least yours hasn't told your people that it was right and necessary to murder and to butcher your kith and kin. But one of the badges of shame in Northern Ireland is that we have a First Minister, IRA acolyte, Michelle O'Neill, who tells us all that there was no alternative to the murder of the IRA. No alternative to murdering young Scottish soldiers that came to the shores of Northern Ireland to defend democracy defend us against terrorism. And yet, a lady of that ilk tells us there was no alternative. To say there's no alternative is to say it was right, is to say it was justified. And that is a scourge on our democracy, that such a party and such a leader lords it over us. So there is much, ladies and gentlemen, that we celebrate today, but we do it with our eyes wide open as to the threats that continue to exist to our United Kingdom. It's been a great encouragement to be with you here today, to see the celebration of culture, to see how alive and well and kicking unionist and loyalist culture is. And I wish you well for the rest of the day. And thank you very much for the opportunity of being with you. Thank you.
Well done, Jeff.
There you go. What a decent speech. I learned a lot from it. I didn't realise how important it was that we protect this. And I now fully understand why many people I know from Northern Ireland are so concerned about the protocol. Because he's right, it is a threat to the whole of the United Kingdom. And something else that I noticed there, I hadn't noticed it when I watched it the first time, but that man didn't once look down at any notes. He went up and gave that speech, and that was not the full speech, a good 15-minute speech from his head and his heart. And I think our leaders in both parliaments that control my life, that's Holyrood and Westminster, could learn from that, where particularly at First Minister's questions, etc., you just see them looking down and reading pre-prepared answers, which may not be even answers by them. So fair play to the man. And one thing I noticed in the comments was PT, who said, we never got Brexit, but it's a disgrace that Northern Ireland have been cast adrift. And I tend to agree with that. And the reason I believe that we didn't get Brexit, see, people were saying, oh, we might get a no-deal Brexit, we might get this, we might get that. I didn't vote for anything other than a Brexit, where we were to come away from the EU and everything that it controlled. And that hasn't happened. And the reason I believe it didn't happen is simple. The vast majority of people in the United Kingdom voted for Brexit. But then we tasked a group of 650 people in Westminster at the time, and hundreds, if not thousands, of civil servants who were left to deal with it. And the majority of them didn't want Brexit. And that's why we ended up with a ridiculous Brexit, where we still have rules and regulations like ACHR, etc., that we abide by, and terrible things like the Northern Ireland Protocol, which, as Jim quite eloquently explained, means we basically have a sea border in the middle of the English Channel. And it's bonkers, and it shouldn't be that. So thanks very much to Jim for that great speech and sharing it on Twitter today, because it certainly helped me understand this problem a little bit more than I did before I seen his speech. Thank you for everybody that's tuned in. And I'm not going to do questions or anything. This isn't a call-in show. This was just to get this out there and let you guys see Jim's speech and hear Jim's speech. So once this is finished, about 5-10 minutes later, it will be packaged up on YouTube and put out as a normal video. If you see that, please click on it. Please hit the thumbs up. Please hit the comments. Please hit the share, so other people can be educated about this threat to our union. And it is serious. If you've not already done so, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because it will let you know when I do some lives. But most importantly of all, unless you're the type of person who agreed to things like this and probably planned for things like this, and some of our politicians who, and particularly in parties who should know better and tell us are unionist parties, but Nigel Farage, who says that it's inevitable that one day there'll be a United Ireland, then not these people. But everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio.